thank you for being here. Every month we have art to lunch the day before First Friday, where you get to have a conversation with the artists about the artwork, ask questions, hear them talk more in depth about what is going on in this room. This month we have Lori Santos, Robert Bubp, who are both very accomplished professors over at WSU, and Vladimir Ramos, who is in Peru.
Yes.
Yeah. Is he a professor?
Yes.
Also a very accomplished professor. And they're going to talk about their work. And so we'll talk about 30 minutes and then we'll open up for questions. If we end a little bit early, I strongly encourage you to stay in the gallery, experience the projection for a little bit, and talk to them about that.
Sorry, I just realized why there's still sound happening. Because when I turn the projector, yeah. So, yeah, actually, we can turn the volume off on the projectors, but you have to do that with the remote.
We'll talk about it.
Right. No, it's not that. It's not nearly as loud.
It's not nearly as loud.
Why we'll have the speakers on.
Yeah.
Right.
All right, well, I will turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Hey, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, for having us. So, yeah, we thought maybe we should start by kind of giving you an idea of what exactly this is. So, we were, Lori's originally from Puerto Rico, and are you from Puerto Rico?
No, my heritage, I'm saying,
Right.
ancestrally from Puerto Rico.
Yeah, and I'm just your standard person from Pennsylvania. But we were invited to be part of an international collective of artists, sort of initiated by someone I know from New Zealand, that was to include 2 or 3 artists from New Zealand, us 2 from the United States, Vladimir from Peru, and 2 different artists from Mexico City. Actually, one of them was from Puebla, they were from Mexico, so one was from Mexico City, one was from Puebla. And this international collective was planning on doing an exhibition about place and the understandings of place that was sort of focused on local identities and how that would look in terms of artwork in a collaborative way. And it all sounds very theoretical because we had a really hard time figuring out what it would look like. And ultimately, because of funding issues and because of travel visa issues, this is not actually going to happen. But what it sparked was last year, Lori and Vladimir and I decided to try to work on figuring out what we would do as part of this collective by us getting some university grants, Lori and I getting some university money to go to Peru and meet with Vladimir, who had been to Wichita.
Yeah, 3 times actually.
Yeah, Lori met him. How did you meet Vladimir?
Oh my gosh, it's kind of a crazy story because when I first started here at WSU in, 2017, that following summer, 2018, I had an international art ed conference that was held at Wichita State during the summer, and Vladimir's colleague actually came to that. Mario. Yeah, did you meet Mario?
I did meet Mario.
Okay, yeah, he's another fabulous artist, and then I decided for my 50th I wanted to go to Peru, and I wanted to go to Machu Picchu because I had done a deep dive study on Peru during graduate work, so it was always like a real love of mine. And so when I went there that next summer, it was the same summer. Mario was in Cuba at the time, so he couldn't meet with me, but he introduced me to Vladimir and a couple of other professors there, and they all worked at the same school. And just from there, Vladimir and I and his family just really became really close, almost like family, extended family, so we've just kept in contact since then.
And you invited him to Wichita State
Yeah,
for workshops, first in 2021.
Yeah, I think it was 2021.
And then 2022 as well.
Yeah.
And I made him when he was here. But then, so we went to Peru, and we did these visiting artist workshops with schools that Vladimir knows of. So we actually went to 4 different schools in Lima and also in Cusco. But we also were there to figure out some ideas about creating artwork in this collaborative, what is local identity and what does it look like kind of way. So what we have, we didn't really end up, and we wanted to do this so that we could figure out a little bit related to this thing, the International Collective, which was going to do a show at the Alabama Contemporary Arts Center in Mobile, Alabama, but it's kind of off the table now. They lost a lot of funding, but also there are visa issues, potentially, quite frankly. People from New Zealand don't want to come here. So there's that. So that's kind of off the table for the time being. Maybe it'll come back. But we then thought that when we do this, we would install it somewhere locally, and thank you, Newman and Emily, for the opportunity. And then maybe try to figure out how to put this in some proposals for some shows in Kansas City and maybe some other places like that. But what we ended up doing wasn't really so much we're all working together on the same thing, but we ended up giving each other rules that we all shared. So we each decided to make 12 artworks on paper, all the same size, 15 inches by 15 inches, that really would explore how we personally understand our relationship to place. And we figured that eventually you would get a sense of, you, the audience, would get a sense of whose was whose, from the similarities in terms of the color palette and the materials used and the marks and techniques and all that. And
I think also I'd like to add that I think it's really interesting too, even though we didn't ultimately, we originally wanted to try to work collaboratively on the pieces. Yeah, but that didn't happen, but still it came together in an interesting way that I think probably from a lot of conversations that we had, that type of collaborative creativity that happens when you get together with people and share stories and ideas and thoughts, and then these came coming out on the paper. For my work, it was very much situated in a place associated with the natural environment, especially my garden, and just being quite fascinated when I was in Peru to just walk around and notice all the beautiful plants and things that just grow there, that we have to go to like the greenhouse or Walmart or wherever to buy and then try to let it survive, in our homes, but there it just like grows right outside in their yard. And just also just this idea of, I think no matter where we went, you saw elements of the natural environment. Like I sort of felt like there was a little bit more of a kinship to it there than sometimes what I find in cities within the United States. Not to say that it's not there in some places, because it is, but and then also for me, just trying to think about indigeneity and then how that is to, walk in spaces that are really the space of someone else that I'm privileged to be able to be in, no matter where it is, and considering Wichita versus Lima. So, yeah, and then Vladimir's work, you probably try to figure out which one is his, I guess. But his work specifically was very tied to the Waka, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. That was a place that we all interacted with, and then he was quite interested into elemental, like the environmental impact on things. And him and I have had a lot of really deep conversations about, climate change and the impact that we have on the environment. And so I think his work was also exploring, things like how water and air impact the visual effect of his work.
My work on the walls were kind of a dialogue between home and sort of being at home and treating it like a sort of research site with what's going on, this old stuff laying around, but also experiencing the outside world through virtually, basically through references to the news and to trauma related to COVID and other events that are going on. But it's all stained with coffee. I drink a lot of coffee, drank coffee in Peru too. There's coffee's very good in Peru, thank you, and less expensive than here. So, there's transfers and drawings of things that are, some of them, like there's a map that my Roomba made of the house that's on some of them. There's dirt from my yard that I've sort of mixed up with acrylic gel and made into a surface on there. So the brown stains are all like coffee, and I really focused on the idea of circles as being stuck in a cycle, which is something I think is kind of an interesting situation that's broader than just me, but also feels like that in a lot of ways. So that circularity was relevant for more than just me, because a lot of the idea of these networks was something that we were sort of focused on with and we have to use these networks in a way that's different, because something we didn't mention now is Vladimir doesn't speak a whole lot of English, although his English is better than our Spanish, because neither of us speak a whole lot of Spanish. So our communications with each other are very awkward, right? Which is kind of funny, but also maybe is part of the reason that we didn't do a whole lot of actual work on the same thing. We set rules on different things and then came up with our interpretation on how it would look different for each of us if we're doing the same thing. So this video, which when we take the chairs out later on, you might be able to see it, is actually each of us did a video walking around this ancient site in Lima that's very close to Vladimir's house, and it's very much in the middle of the city, kind of in a neighborhood, but also very close to some very big arteries. And it's called the Huaca Pucana. It's an indigenous structure that was built, I don't know, it's before the Incas, so it's like 1,500 years old or something like that. It's a really interesting site. We each interpreted walking around it a little differently, which was kind of the point. And you can kind of tell whose is whose a little bit maybe. We do have artist statements back there for each of us also to help explain what we're doing. The sound that's running is only from Vladimir's, because Vladimir got, I thought, when I was doing the editing of the videos, the most interesting sounds. There's a lot of birds, and his has a combination of bird sounds that you do hear in this environment in Peru, even in the city, but he also has cars on it and people walking. There's a jogger at one point running by here that you see it on the video. And we sort of overlap them in this way to suggest the intersubjectivity of the three of us kind of coming together and trying to figure out what this means to be in be three different people from three different cultures in one place at the same time.
It's interesting when I even looked at it. We didn't see each other's videos actually until the show came together.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting to now look at the videos to see those perspectives. And Vladimir's, I think, of all the three videos, he has the most images that actually show you parts of the Huaca.
Right.
And he lives there. And being indigenous also from Peru, I think that's very special and iconic of him that he did that. Of course, mine you'll probably figure out in the middle. There's a lot of plant references because that's what I was focusing in on. And there's also a lot of dogs.
Mine, which is mostly blocked at this point, was actually at night, and I focused on the shadows, but also I photographed mostly my feet walking. And I've taken an approach to doing a series of walking videos with studies that I've done in Latin America because of how I feel about being an American tourist in a place that the U.S. has had a very heavy presence in the last, it related to colonialism and coming from a culture that is more of a dominant power in this part of the world. My sense of being in this place is related to being a guest, and I end up feeling like it's appropriate to sort of focus on that more than being the viewer that makes it look like I'm in charge of this, because that's kind of the way we interpret video forms like that. It's like the person behind the camera taking the images is sort of like taking a kind of ownership of those.
Yeah.
So that's why mine It's more focused on feet, but you get shadows of other people walking by, and also sounds of steps and things like that. And you get the sounds of the walk, well, you would get sounds of walkers, but I think sound for that is why it's better.
I think it's interesting on your video too, how you kind of, with focusing on your feet, you're taking yourself out of that place of being the warrior.
Right.
You know, like,
That's right.
like romanticizing another place and people, and so that you know, it's almost like trying to. For me, when I look at your piece to interpret it, I'm thinking about you're sort of being mindful and present about I'm here in another space.
Right.
You know.
Which is the point, so thank you for that.
Yeah.
Right. So Lori made the sort of drawing over here where we had this idea to make some work related to the comments that we were giving each other on WhatsApp while we're trying to communicate. So essentially that's where all the text comes from. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, Lori, you did this inspired by the sort of aerial view of the map of Wichita.
Yeah, that's kind of, we had talked about that, and yeah, thinking about, you know, what that space encompassed, and that we also traversed the whole space, and so, you know, getting a different, you know, bird's eye view of that, and it kind of morphed. There's a lot of different shapes in there now, but we were also both very interested in the circularity of it and the spiraling. I think that's also a very sacred type of imagery, journey type of, for a lot of different cultures, especially within indigenous cultures. But I think it's really fun to see the things that we talked about, and you can see a little bit of the humor in it, like, you know, when we're there, Vladimir's saying, like, the chicken waits for you. He's like picking up something for us.
He made some Peruvian chicken, it's absolutely amazing, and he made some homemade chicken, and I was late getting over there, so he sent me a WhatsApp saying, Robert, come over to the house now. And then it said, the chicken waits for you.
With it, I don't know if I put the exclamation.
Right.
Vladimir used a lot of exclamation points in his message to us, which is really fun.
We didn't include any of our really bad Spanish, because we were definitely, we're not as much of it, because we're definitely like communicating in awkward English and awkward Spanish, and we were using a lot of like Google Translate to try to make sure we fully understood each other, and also making it work too, is exactly what we were doing, and trying to sort out what we're doing.
Right.
The last thing that we have in the monitor back there is we just gathered up a bunch of photographs we had collected from both Wichita and from Lima, and a couple of them from Cusco, a few here and there.
Yeah.
But then they're just a random assortment of our photographs of these different places. So there's images of Vladimir when he was here at Wichita State. There's things we had, you know, put in that we feel are good images of Kansas. I have one of the Garden of Eden that pops up in there, for example, in Lucas, Kansas. And then we have things that are from Peru as well, and there's probably about 60 images on it. So you can cycle, it'll take a minute to cycle through all of them. You'll see the Keeper of the Plains was just up there, and you'll see flowers from Peru.
No, those are milkweed actually right there.
Potato chips are made with Peruvian potatoes.
I'm not a huge chip fan, but I will say that, you know, potatoes are from South America. There's like 4,000 plus different kinds of potatoes, and they are so wonderful. And the food there was just phenomenal. Not a lot of added ingredients, and just very fresh. Everything they cook every day, just very fresh. So even a couple of the fast food type restaurants that we went to, honestly, was better than some of the restaurants we've been to here in the States.
Yeah, Peruvian food is really good.
It's exceptional for sure. So food, coffee, you know, just good conversation, art, all of that was going on in this experiment. And I think Robert wants to share a little bit about some words that Vladimir sent us.
See, it's traditional in Peru when they have an art opening like this, they actually do like a formal presentation.
Yes, they
speech,
do.
right?
Yeah, they do a speech.
So whereas what we do is what we're doing, which is like a little gallery talk. It's us just like talking off the cuff. So Vladimir sent some words, so he asked me to read them. So he says, a warm greeting to everyone attending this opening. It is an honor for me to participate alongside such talented artists and art professionals with whom I have shared valuable experiences of academic exchange between Lima and Wichita. I want to express my deep gratitude to Dr. Lori Santos who in 2021 gave me the opportunity to visit Wichita. She generously opened her home to me and allowed me to witness firsthand her tireless academic and artistic work. At a time when the world was still immersed in the COVID-19 crisis, I conducted a workshop for Wichita State University entitled Making Identities. For 4 weeks, I provided guidance on creating artwork from discarded clothing. Simultaneously, I created a series of paintings that encapsulated the intercultural connections I discovered while visiting museums, interacting with local artists, and experiencing the pulse of the state. I recognized in this land a rich cultural heritage from the Native American peoples whose values resonate deeply with those of the original cultures of Peru, artistic expressions, material knowledge, and worldviews that remain alive and active today. I also wish to express my gratitude for my friendship with Robert and my appreciation for his career as an artist and teacher over the years. The collection of works presented here today are the fruit of perspectives that go beyond a mere tourist visit. They are sensations that materialize in the horizontality of a sacred site that, in its time, served a ceremonial and administrative function within the Lima culture. So this is the Lima culture, which is again pre-Incan and was focused very much in the coastline, whereas of course the Incans were in the mountains originally, right? It was a center of religious power where rituals related to water, fertility, and cosmic order were performed. During my walks around the perimeter of Oaxaca, I felt a profound fascination with water as a purifying element. Water, a symbol of the passage of life, but wears away and restores. In it, as in art, resides the memory of what is essential. So, there's the statement.
Yeah, so maybe we open it up for
Yes.
questions now?
Questions,
I think.
comments, thoughts?
Yeah.
For both of you, what was the most rewarding aspect of this whole project, and what was the most challenging aspect?
I think seeing the creativity and you know the thinking of another artist and you know the conversations is actually both rewarding and challenging because of some of the communication things. But I found it very interesting to be able to try to talk about how it is that we understand a particular place, whether connected or disconnected from it, and then how does that then transpire into a work of art, and just the variety of interpretations can be really exciting.
Yeah, to me, the rewarding parts are so many. Sitting here counting them, always talking.
Yeah.
Number one is getting to know Vladimir, who I really didn't, during COVID when he was even here, I met him in passing.
Right.
Getting to know him and his family, getting to work more with Lori, to travel with Lori, and she had been to Peru, and her as sort of a guide to these things was amazing. Getting to go to Peru. One of the great things about being in academia, frankly, is that they want you to do these things because you're representing the university when you do it, and they oftentimes will provide you with some degree, if not full support, at least partial support to be able to do. And you get these, like the reason I knew the guy from New Zealand was because I got to do an artist residency in New Zealand in 2019. So those opportunities are incredible. And getting to go to Peru and do that with people who were already there. I didn't have to go by myself. I didn't even have to really speak Spanish competently. And Vladimir and Lori to rely on. And then there's the opportunity to make work in this collaborative way where what you get out of that is a completely other sense of how it can go. And I had this whole vision for how I would do any number of things in this show. And Lori would say, what about this? And I'd go, first, my reaction almost always is kind of like, oh, no, I like it my way, as she knows, right? And then I would think about it. I go home and think about it, and I go,
Hear me out, Robert.
I go home and think about it, and I go, you know, that could be really cool. And then, like, Lori's responsible for this. You know, I had a whole different sense of what this was going to look like. And Lori said, what if we do it this way? And I was just like, that would be great, actually. And Lori's responsible for that. And I kind of did this, right? And you know, but the thing is, like, even when we did the wakas, we had to try to, the waka walks, we got different things that we were not expecting from each other. So, like, they're sort of like not following this really strict pattern in terms of like, okay, we will set rules and the rules have to be exactly followed. I mean, one of the things that artists do is we come up with limits and guidelines for ourselves. We set a problem. But then we kind of work against that. So we have the limit of paper, 15 by 15, 12 works each, right? It has to be sort of an interpretation of place. The place doesn't literally have to be the waka, it doesn't literally have to be Wichita, but it can be in the sense of what a place means to you. And here we have, we're walking around the waka. It takes 25 minutes to walk all the way around there. You can't really do that in a single video. So I got the ability to take the videos that I had, kind of edit them into what I thought was a little more interesting and also something that looped around in 5 minutes or so. And so if anybody did watch it all the way through, they wouldn't be sitting here feeling like they need a Netflix subscription, bored out of their skulls. And also to pick what I thought was interesting in terms of the sound effects. Which, but the point is, it's a really big reward to be able to work with different people who give you the generosity of the creative process as they give you different ideas. And then you kind of go, the reward of working collaboratively is to be able to see yourself being a little bit like, no, I should try that. And trying new things and creative risk are super important. And you want to say to yourself, yeah, I can see how that would work, and totally go with the flow. And it's like it is a real privilege.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I agree. Yeah, opening yourself up to the possibilities of different interpretations and learning from somebody else, you know, is fabulous. Especially folks that are coming from a completely different, you know, culture or sensibility about the way, you know, they walk in this world, right?
Yeah.
So we also, while we were there, and then when Vladimir was here, all three of us did workshops with students at our respective universities. So that was a really wonderful part of this experience, that we built that in, and we were also interacting with students.
Yeah, and that, definitely. Yes.
So I'm curious, when you say you integrated all 3 points of view, can you talk a little bit about the process of how you did that?
Well, we assigned each other a task. So it was like, go for a walk around. We were working off of a concept in 20th century art history called a derive that was done by a group of artists called the Situationists. And they basically decided in the 1960s to do these things they called them derive, which is basically the French word for drift. So they would do a drift around the city, meaning that they would kind of like get out of the networks. They felt like there was mass media was creating too many sort of networks of what you were supposed to do, and you had to follow these paths. And they used the derive, the drift, as a way to get off the path. So they would just kind of wander. So we gave ourselves a task of walking around the waka with no instructions as to exactly what to record. And so Lori stopped at so many points. Like her videos are like, she's walking and then she's like, you know, and I was like focused on the ground and walked all the way around without hardly even stopping. And Vladimir actually went inside the waka at some point, and I ended up not including that because the sound was there were some issues with the sound in particular, so they got edited out. We all do different things. And so what you have is, and one of the things also that we did differently was that Lori turned her camera vertically, and I at first gave her a hard time about that. And I was like, I can't believe you turned your camera vertically. Don't you know you shoot a video like this? And then it was great that she did because it lines up in an amazing way. way.
Yeah, the overlap
In
is
the
very
center.
interesting.
Yeah.
For sure.
And I was like, that's one of those like happy accidents where you do, if I had in my head, you have to do it this way. And Lori is like, no, I did it this way. And I was like, wow, that works great actually. And it's like really beautiful. So, but yeah, we didn't really, I was the editor for these, and I just tried to keep the spirit of it while getting out some things that maybe, and trying to refine it down into what it really should be. So mine originally was over 20 minutes, and I got it down to about 6. And Lori's was over 20 minutes, and it got down to about 8. And Vladimir's is like 3. But they are sort of, are different point of view. But then they're formally, in terms of in the space, a kind of a mashup. They're definitely overlapping. And when we put the projections in, I know from doing video before that those projections were not going to be small because I didn't want to use the ceiling. They were going to have to go to a place that was far away, and they were going to have to end up being pretty big. And I didn't know beforehand how much they were going to overlap, but I knew they could. And then once I started setting it up and found I could really sort of make this like visual collage out of it, I was pretty excited about that. And that's how we ended up with Lori's like sort of, not exactly in the middle, but a little off center. And I like to making the video form seem a little more sculptural that way, yeah. So that was an exciting development that I couldn't have predicted walking in. I don't know how it's going to look, but we're going to figure something out. Hopefully I answered your question in a roundabout way. Walk us sort of way. Yeah.
So Vladimir, his statement included a little bit about the materiality and how that's related to the indigenous cultures from here and from Wichita. And then I noticed on the wall you mentioned the word coffee and dirt, and then you talked about, and I could see all the pieces there on this that. Could you talk about how that was related to this theme of place and then like original craft being really tied to practical materiality?
Yeah. Well, I think for me, definitely the garden, and you'll see in my statement that they talk about, going back to place for me in my garden and making that my sort of sanctuary. And so a lot of I do eco printings, and so a lot of my pieces you'll see that I'm doing these heat press type prints using flowers, leaves, things that I collect. And then also making my own inks and watercolors. Again, here, these are all inks and watercolors that I'm making out of things like morning glories and pokeberries, things that I gather from my own yard, so very, very organic in that sense. And then I have a huge sort of medicinal garden. I added in, this is actually from my garden, these are stalks after I've stripped the leaves for tarragon. That's what these are right here. And yeah.
Being in Peru with Lori was really cool because we would go walking somewhere and Lori would go off to the side and collect these flowers and leaves and she had a little bag that she carried everywhere we went. And then we would go back to wherever we were staying, and Lori was making art right there.
Yes.
We're like in the Airbnb or whatever,
Yeah,
and there's a kitchen, and Lori's like out there making more of these kinds of prints because you had to use the flowers and it was pretty fresh, right?
Right.
So she's making art as we go.
Yeah.
And it was also, again, really inspiring to watch because here's somebody who's like so inspired by what they're doing. They're definitely going to do it right here because you kind of had to get it to work.
Yeah.
And
then even also the other thing that I do with connecting back to the natural environment is that I'm leaving back a gift of whether it's sort of an intimate conversation with that plant, a prayer, if you will, meditation, and physically a piece of my hair. So there's a lot of little pieces of purple hair all over Newman and Wichita and other places that I've traveled.
Yeah.
But yeah.
For me as a Western steeped artist, the coffee. I've always liked using weird materials in my work, and the coffee kind of emerged from the idea of the coffee ring as a stain, suggesting both the past and something that was left behind, but a presence as well. And I was at an exhibition in Mexico City over the summer by an artist named Gabriel Roscoe, who's probably Mexico's most famous contemporary artist right now. And he had a lot of circles and things in his work, and I had not realized that the circles for him were about networks and circulation. So it's like money, goes through this network of circulation. And to me, that made me think about the idea of being in a place and being caught in a cycle through a mental cycle or an emotional cycle or anything like that, which is a little bit of what had already started in a body of work already. So the coffee ring combined with the Roscoe's circulation got me thinking about cycles and about being stuck in loops, and that came into more foreground with using coffee more broadly as a background and sort of staining it, pouring it, and then layering it, and then the earth and the other images were really just kind of the sense of archaeologizing the space I'm in, which has to include, to me, a virtual space. So it's not only like digging into like, oh, there's these old railroads that have been sitting around asking me what I'm going to do with them. But there's also what I'm processing now, being someone who's in the comfort of my Midwestern home, understanding how the world is unfolding around me and how I relate to that largely through, virtual news, right? And that's kind of where the materiality combines with the virtual, but I can't claim an indigenous rationale for them. It's much more of for me, an area of interest that's related to referencing the past and being creative with materials and using things that are immediately around me.
Yeah, I think, and the circularity of it too, you walk around the Maca and think about the directionality, 4 directions you'll see in some of my work, and for me the circle is more of a interconnectedness of how, it's a cycle that things keep getting picked up and reused in hopefully a good way, which is kind of like, the circularity of the conversation between us, actually even, what can be learned, what can be shared, given back, it's a sense of reciprocity between all of these different types of experiences.
Right.
That's really important, and I think that's definitely a very indigenous perspective that I took for the experience.
Yeah.
And just the way I try to do everything that I do.
I hadn't thought of it that way. That's really beautiful. Right? Somebody else had their hand up a little while ago.
Any other questions?
At least from what I can see, you don't have your names with your works over there. I'm sure that's on purpose. Why not?
Well,
Sort of.
yeah, I feel like
Yeah.
well, personally, speaking from my point of view, that would create another. I don't really want to think of these as individuated artworks that way. To get to that point, because it's not that kind of show. And we didn't want to emphasize our separateness anymore than you can already tell from the differences in the artworks. But also, I think another thing is I feel like if you look enough, you can tell whose work is whose. Like there's enough visual consistency that it would be pretty easy to figure out this work is by this artist, this work is by that artist. And I kind of like welcoming that idea myself. So.
And maybe it also invites the viewer to become a part of our circle of experience, and because you've got it. I mean, I think we can see that once we've spent a little bit of time, but that's part of it, it's asking you to spend a little bit of time with the pieces, so
Yeah.
that then you can discern that, oh, that was Vladimir's, that's Robert's, that's Lori's.
It was really a lot more important for us to emphasize the fact that we were working together rather and let that be the way the show was presented. We do have separate artist statements on there are still back there, and that might hopefully give you some keys as to who was doing what. But I think that we kind of invite the idea that there's some sort of shared, point of view or understanding. We're happy to tell you who did what, but on the other hand, in the show itself, we wanted to present it as work that happened by three people who were sort of overlapping each other in a lot of ways, and not make it seem like we did this totally individually, irrespective of each other's thought process.
All